Today, a family brutally slaughtered.
Police say Penny Caffey and her 8 and 13-year-old sons were shot and stabbed multiple times before dying. The house was then set on fire.
Police have arrested the 16-year-old daughter.
She has told a lot of different stories about what happened the night that they were murdered, but today...
The world of crime is often littered with chilling tales of serial killers who evade justice for years. Among them, Keith Hunter Jesperson, infamously known as the Happy Face Killer, stands out for his twisted game of taunting authorities. His crimes, spanning across multiple states in the United States, sent shockwaves through communities and law enforcement alike. But how did this long-haul truck driver slip through the cracks for so long? The answer lies in the perfect storm of manipulation, a lack of forensic advancements at the time, and a chillingly calm demeanor that allowed him to blend into society. It wasn't until Jesperson himself began writing anonymous confessions, accompanied by a smiling face, that the true scale of his crimes came to light. Before that, innocent, people had been wrongly convicted. The police had followed misleading trails, and the families of victims had been left in the dark. This is the story of how one man's insatiable thirst for control and murder led to a decade-long killing spree, only to be unraveled by his arrogance. Keith Hunter Jesperson, Early Life and Warning Signs. Keith Jesperson was born in 1955 in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. From an early age, he exhibited signs of cruelty that often serve as red flags in criminal psychology. Reports from his childhood suggest he had a troubled relationship with his father, who was allegedly abusive and instilled a sense of aggression in him. Like many serial killers, Jesperson started with small acts of violence, targeting animals. Stories surfaced of him torturing and killing small creatures, a behavior often associated with psychopathy. These early warning signs, however, went unnoticed or were dismissed as mere childhood mischief. By the time he reached adulthood, Jesperson was already on a dangerous path. Despite his dark tendencies, Jesperson lived what seemed like a normal life on the surface. He got married, had children, and worked as a truck driver, a job that gave him access to multiple locations across the country. This mobility would later prove crucial in helping him evade capture for years. Family life and the facade of normalcy. Jesperson's personal life painted a vastly different picture from his gruesome reality. He was a husband and a father, living what seemed to be a typical suburban life. His daughter, Melissa Moore, would later come forward with chilling recollections of growing up under his roof. According to Moore, there were moments when Jesperson's mask slipped, revealing glimpses of his true nature. He often displayed an unsettling lack of empathy, and there were instances of controlling and intimidating behavior. Yet, despite these moments, his family had no idea of the monster lurking beneath his seemingly ordinary exterior. His marriage eventually ended in divorce, and his children moved away. However, this separation only seemed to fuel his dark urges. With no one watching over him, Jesperson's desire to kill escalated, and soon, his first victim would meet a tragic fate. The first murder and the rise of a serial killer. In January 1990, Keith Jesperson claimed his first known victim, 23-year-old Tanja Bennett in Portland, Oregon. Bennett, who had mild intellectual disabilities, was lured into his grasp, unaware of the horror awaiting her. Under the guise of kindness, Jesperson invited her to his home, where he soon revealed his true nature. After a brief altercation, he brutally strangled her to death with his bare hands. This moment marked the turning point in Jesperson's life. Unlike impulsive killers, he took pleasure in the act, feeling a disturbing sense of satisfaction and control. Yet what followed was even more shocking. He managed to walk away without raising suspicion. Authorities initially did not suspect Jesperson. Instead, Laverne Pavlinac, a woman seeking attention, falsely confessed to the crime alongside her partner, John Sosnovsky. Their wrongful conviction meant that Jesperson remained free, allowing him to continue his killing spree across different states. Over the next 5 years, Jesperson continued his murders, preying on vulnerable women, often sex workers or women he met at truck stops. He developed a pattern, luring victims into his truck, strangling them, and disposing of their bodies in remote areas. He traveled frequently, making it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots between his crimes. Despite the gruesomeness of his acts, Jesperson remained confident. He sent taunting letters to newspapers and law enforcement, always signing them with a smiling face, thus earning his infamous nickname, the Happy Face Killer. But as with many serial killers, his arrogance would eventually lead to his downfall. A serial killer emerges. Patterns and modus operandi. With his first successful murder behind him, Jesperson's confidence grew, and so did his thirst for killing. Unlike impulsive or disorganized killers, he developed a distinct pattern that made him particularly dangerous. His profession as a long-haul truck driver gave him the perfect cover, constantly traveling, never staying in one place for too long, and having access to secluded areas where bodies could be dumped with minimal risk of discovery. Jesperson primarily targeted women, many of whom were sex workers or individuals he met at truck stops. His method was always eerily similar. He would lure victims into his truck or a motel room, often under the pretense of offering help, companionship, or money. Once they were in his grasp, he would overpower them and strangle them to death with his bare hands. This hands-on approach indicated a need for dominance and control. He enjoyed watching the life drain from his victims, relishing in the power he held over them in their final moments. Unlike other serial killers who might use weapons or leave behind traces of evidence, Jesperson's method left little for forensic investigators to analyze. Strangulation did not produce bloodshed, and, because he frequently changed locations, his crimes were difficult to connect. He disposed of bodies along highways, in remote wooded areas, or in ditches, ensuring they would remain undiscovered for as long as possible. Between 1990 and 1995, Jesperson is believed to have killed at least 8 women, though he later claimed the number was much higher. He showed no remorse for his crimes and even felt invincible, convinced that law enforcement would never catch up to him. This overconfidence would eventually play a significant role in his downfall. What made Jesperson unique among serial killers was his need for recognition. Most killers avoid drawing attention to their crimes, but Jesperson wanted the world to know what he had done. Frustrated that his early murders were not linked to him, he began leaving taunting messages in rest stops and mailing letters to newspapers, detailing his crimes and signing them with a simple, eerie smiley face, thus earning the nickname, the Happy Face Killer. His need to gloat would ultimately become his greatest weakness, leading investigators straight to him, taunting the authorities. The Happy Face letters. Jesperson was not just content with murder, he wanted recognition. He watched as the media and law enforcement failed to link the crimes together, and it frustrated him. His need for notoriety led him to take an unusual step for a serial killer. He began leaving messages detailing his crimes. He first wrote anonymous, confessions on public bathroom walls, truck stops, and rest areas, scrawling out hints about his murders. But these cryptic notes did not get the attention he desired. So, in a move that would cement his infamous nickname, he began sending letters to newspapers and law enforcement agencies, signing them with a simple, eerie smiley face. In these letters, he described the details of his murders, giving investigators clues about where the bodies were dumped and mocking their inability to catch him. The Happy Face letters were filled with a chilling arrogance. Jesperson believed he was untouchable. He claimed responsibility for up to 160 murders, though authorities could only confirm 8. Despite his efforts to gain attention, the police struggled to piece together his identity. The randomness of his victims and his constant movement made it nearly impossible to establish a clear pattern. However, Jesperson's own arrogance would eventually lead to his downfall. His final victim, Julianne Winningham, was different. Unlike his previous victims, she had a personal connection to Jesperson. They had been romantically involved. When her body was discovered in 1995, investigators quickly focused on Jesperson as a suspect. Feeling the pressure of the investigation, he confessed, marking the end of his reign of terror. For most of her childhood, Melissa Moore had no idea that her father was a serial killer. She saw him as a quiet but sometimes intimidating man, one who could switch from a loving parent to an emotionally detached figure in an instant. It wasn't until after his arrest in 1995 that her world came crashing down. Melissa vividly remembers the day she learned the horrifying truth. She was in school when news broke that her father had been arrested for multiple murders. The revelation shattered her perception of him, leaving her to grapple with the unimaginable reality that the man who had once tucked her into bed was a sadistic murderer. In the years that followed, Melissa struggled with the weight of her father's crimes. She faced bullying, public scrutiny, and the internal torment of reconciling the father she knew with the monster the world saw. Determined not to let his legacy define her, she chose to break the cycle of violence. She changed her name, distanced herself from the past, and later spoke out about her experiences. Melissa has since used her platform to raise awareness about the families of killers, the forgotten victims who must live with the stigma of their loved ones' actions. Her story is one of resilience, proving that even in the shadow of horror, there is hope for a new beginning. The investigation and capture Jesperson's downfall began when he made the critical mistake of murdering Julie, Ann Winningham. Winningham was not a stranger unlike his previous victims. She was someone he had dated. When her body was discovered, police quickly linked Jesperson to the crime. Under mounting pressure, he wrote a letter to his brother confessing to multiple murders. This letter eventually found its way to law enforcement, sealing his fate. Jesperson was arrested in March 1995, and after hours of interrogation, provided a full confession to his crimes, bringing an end to his reign of terror. Trial, conviction, and prison life. Jesperson faced multiple murder charges across several states. Given the overwhelming evidence, he ultimately pleaded guilty to 8 murders to avoid the death penalty. In 1995, he was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. Today, he remains incarcerated in Oregon, serving out his sentence. Jesperson has continued to claim additional victims over the years, though many of these confessions are unverified. His case remains one of the most chilling examples of how a seemingly ordinary man can lead a life of unfathomable darkness. Legacy and lessons from the case. The case of Keith Hunter Jesperson, the happy face killer, serves as a haunting reminder of the complexities of criminal investigations, the dangers of wrongful convictions, and the hidden darkness that can exist behind seemingly normal facades. His ability to evade capture for years highlights the flaws in law enforcement's ability to track transient serial offenders, particularly those with access to multiple jurisdictions. One of the most critical lessons from this case is the importance of forensic advancements and interagency cooperation. Jesperson exploited the lack of communication between police departments across different states, making it difficult to link his crimes. In the modern era, improvements in DNA analysis, national criminal databases, and digital tracking make it significantly harder for serial offenders to remain undetected. Another significant takeaway is the psychological profile of serial killers. Jesperson exhibited early warning signs: animal cruelty, lack of empathy, and a desire for control, all of which were overlooked. This reinforces the need for greater awareness and intervention when individuals display such behaviors, potentially preventing future violent crimes. The wrongful conviction of Laverne Pavlinak and John Sosnovsky in Tanja Bennett's murder also underscores the risks of false confessions and flawed investigative methods. Their imprisonment due to coerced statements highlights the necessity for caution in law enforcement procedures, ensuring that justice is based on solid evidence rather than circumstantial assumptions. Perhaps the most personal and tragic impact of Jesperson's crimes is the lasting trauma inflicted on his family, particularly his daughter, Melissa Moore. Her journey of coping with the horrifying revelation about her father sheds light on the struggles faced by the families of criminals, who often live under a shadow of stigma and guilt despite being innocent themselves. In the end, the story of the happy face killer is not just about one man's atrocities, but also about the broader implications for criminal justice, victim advocacy, and the ongoing pursuit of safety in society. It stands as a grim cautionary tale, ensuring that future generations remain vigilant against the hidden threats that lurk beneath the surface.